Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining us. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. My name is Kina Leclerc and I will be your moderator. Je m'appelle Kina Leclerc et je serai l'animatrice de ce point de presse. Before we begin, a quick reminder to place yourself on mute until I invite you to speak or to ask your question. Available for questions from the media, we have, disponible pour répondre aux questions des médias, nous accueillons in Council Chambers, Mayor, le maire, Jim Watson, Steve Kanellakos, City Manager, Directeur Municipal, Wendy Stephenson, Chief Financial Officer, Chef des Finances. Phoning in today, we have Dr. Vera Etches, Chief Medical Officer of Health, Médecin-Chef en Santé Publique, Dan Chénier, General Manager, Cultural and Facility Services, Directeur Général, Service des loisirs, de la culture et des installations, Donna Gray, General Manager, Community and Social Services, Directrice générale des services sociaux et communautaires, Stephen Willis, General Manager, Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Department, Service de la planification de l'infrastructure et du développement économique. We also have Kevin Wiley, General Manager, Public Works and Environmental Service, Directeur général, Service des travaux publics et des services environnementaux, Valerie Turner, General Manager, Innovative Client Services, Directrice générale, Service novateur pour la clientèle, Rick O'Connor, City Clerk, Office of the City Clerk, Greffier municipal, Bureau du greffier municipal, Kim Ayotte, Acting General Manager, Emergency and Protective Services, Directeur général par intérim, Service de protection d'urgence, et Renée Amilcar, General Manager, Transit Services, Directrice générale, Service des transports en commun. I will now invite each agency to ask their question. You may ask one question with one follow-up. Par ordre alphabétique, j'invite maintenant chaque organisme.
By alphabetical order, I will ask every organization to ask one question.
Try phoning in again or contact Media Relations to submit your question. A note to media, to avoid interference with interpretation, please turn off any interpretation settings you have on Zoom when you are asking your question. So we will now start with Joanne Chianello at CBC Ottawa.
Hello, I love being first. Happy last budget day of the term. This question is for the mayor and city manager. Mayor, you talked about how expensive everything is becoming, and of course you want to help keep homeownership affordable for homeowners. But if Stats Canada is predicting inflation of possibly more than 4% next year, how can the city afford afford its services on a 3% tax increase?
Thank you, Joanne, for the question. As you know, the proposed tax cap is 3%, and the assessment growth is, I believe, 1.7% for 4.7%. So that's in the range of what StatsCan is projecting to be the rate of inflation. The challenge, of course, we have is that if we don't control our spending and the tax rate goes above 3%, then that's passed on to consumers, particularly renters and individuals in low-income circumstances, that we don't want to burden them further. We don't have control over the price of meat and groceries and fresh fruit and vegetables and gasoline and so on. So what we have to do, I think what we have an obligation to do, is do everything we can to remain within that 3% cap, recognizing that we're also getting additional 1.7% for services. Many of these services are for the vulnerable in our community. And as you know, in my speech, I spent a fair amount of time on the challenges the vulnerable in our society are facing, whether it's housing or mental health challenges. And my hope is that members of council will recognize that we don't want to add to the burden of our taxpayers by increasing taxes beyond 3%. Thank you. Wendy had a comment, Joanne?
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, Joanne. When we develop the budget, we look at the actuals in terms of things that are going to be increasing. So when you talk about inflation, just remember that things at the municipality don't necessarily have the same inflation rate as the inflation that you're seeing out there. So what we leverage things like our hedging policy to lock in our diesel prices and our gas prices to control those and have predictability. And then we also build in what some of the increases look like in terms of some of the services, or whether it's electricity or hydro, is to actual. So we've built that in to the budget that was tabled today. Thanks.
I should also point out, Joanne, that our collective agreements are locked in and stable for 2022 as well. Thank you.
Okay, so that do they expire? This is not my follow-up. I'm just cheating. But as though those collective agreements expire after 2022, Mayor?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Are those collective agreements expiring next year then, or do you know?
Wendy?
Actually, hi, John, Steve. We're a little bit out of order here. No, the most of our collective agreements we've signed up for now are 5-year deals. So we have certainty heading right into next term of council. So we have ATU, QP is the same, CIPP, we're in the process. So everyone, the trend is 5 years. Police did the same thing. So we have certainty certainly going through to the end of this term of council and well into the next term.
Okay, that explains a lot. Thanks. And my second question is about the funding from other levels of government for COVID recovery. I know from Wendy Stephenson has said before that we weren't expecting any money in 2022. Now we're looking for it. How important is that money? I know we can cover it through reserves, but I assume that's not ideal. And Mayor, how confident are you that that money is going to come through for 2022?
Well, that's a good question, and we received some good news today from the province that indicated that they were going to cover our investments in the vaccination and testing sites to the Ottawa Board of Health, and I'll ask Keith Eglai also to make a comment, or Vera. So, the province has always said, particularly on healthcare, that they will continue to make us whole. And their announcement today does make us whole for 2021. And now it's up to us at the political level through the big city mayors of Ontario at the provincial level and big city mayors federally at the federal level to continue to work with those two orders of government to ensure that we remain whole for public health and transit, which are the two largest expenditure challenges that we have facing our city and, quite frankly, every city in Ontario and Canada. We're all in the same boat. It's not as if Ottawa is the only one that's suffering or dealing with, challenges to their budgets on a number of different lines. So Keith, do you want to just comment on, we've been very successful to date. Every time there's been a request put forward to the province, they have been very gracious and generous and have come forward with support so we can close the end of the year in the black. Keith?
And he may not be on the call, Mayor. It's Vera Etches, the medical officer of health. I can confirm this, that in 2020, the province paid all of the extraordinary COVID-19 expenses that we incurred for the general COVID response. And in 2021, this is the case now. We've just confirmed that they will cover all of the extraordinary costs related to both the immunization campaign as well as the ongoing general COVID response. So this is what they had promised, and they've confirmed it in writing now. Thank you.
I think so. Most people would expect the province to pay the health costs, but what about the $60 million in transit costs?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask Wendy to comment on that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Joanne, you'll see when we did the presentation on the budget, it's a bit of what I call a bit of a mishmash in terms of the mitigations that we have in place. So we have funded some of those ourselves through our reserves. So if you look at the municipal pressures, we're leveraging approximately $23 million to cover those costs. For transit, the number is big, but all indications in terms of the conversations that are being had at both FCM, the Big City Mayor's Caucus, are trending towards us getting a multi-year deal. That's what we're hearing between 22 and 23. So we're waiting to hear for that. We have a full mitigation plan behind that in terms of being able to fill that gap if we need to. With public health, today, as Dr. Etches said and the mayor said, we had really good news. Approximately $44.3 million was confirmed through the province, and they have given us verbal confirmation in terms of that rolling into next year as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we will go to Ted Raymond at CTV Ottawa.
Hi there. All right. I guess I want to start just with a comment. I'd like to hear from Mayor Watson and from Ms. Amilcar on the province's letter to the city about withholding LRT funds, given everything that's going on. Do you find this fair? And, do you think this money will be held back? And if it is, what does that mean for the city? What does that mean for OC Transpo?
City Manager.
Hi, Ted. Yeah, we received first of all, I want to say we received the letter at 8:25 p.m. last night. And as you know, most of us senior staff are getting ready for the budget today, which is a significant day in the annual cycle of the city. So we got to it this morning, and there's 3 points there that they're looking for validation on. And I can say that all 3 points that they raised, we'll be able to respond with a positive response. All the things that they talked about are actually being reviewed by TRA, our independent safety monitor. They'll be able to answer those questions when we have the technical briefing in detail in terms of what we've done. And there's no issues in my mind of us not being able to respond fully to what they've asked. I don't believe that 60 million holdback is in jeopardy at all. Anything they've asked is actually in execution mode right now, and I am certain we will satisfy the questions that they have under the agreement that we have with the Ministry of Transportation.
And Ted, if I could just offer a follow-up comment to that. First and foremost, obviously the province is concerned about safety of the system, as we are, and we have made it very, very clear to all of our partners that until we have a sign-off by our independent safety advisor, then we will not be bringing the service back. But we look forward to bringing you more information in the days ahead. But bottom line remains that until we are 100% satisfied with the safe return of the service, we won't push an opening date just to meet a specific timetable. The timetable has to be wrapped around security and safety. And I have full confidence in the independent advisor that the city manager has hired that reports to him and not to OC Transpo. Thank you.
Ted, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, my follow-up, I guess, is also just related to OC Transpo. I mean, given all of these issues that we've had recently, is it fair to bring in this fare hike that's budgeted, just given the state of affairs on the system?
Well, as you know, we have a plan to provide a no-charge service for our customers who have been put through a lot in the month of December. and that's still planned to go forward with that. Secondly, if we're to improve the system and increase the capacity of bus service and train service, we need to keep up with inflation. And as you know, inflation is going up. The 2.5% is under the rate of inflation. And we recognize that we first and foremost have to improve the quality of the service and regain the public's confidence. But we believe that the month of no charge service in December is a small step towards regaining that confidence in the system that we've lost over the last several months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now be going to Alex Gouge at City News Ottawa.
Hello. My first question is for Mayor Watson. I know you briefly, or I know not so briefly, touched on this during your speech, but how do you find this budget will support residents, especially those with lower incomes?
Well, a couple of ways. First and foremost, capping the tax rate at 3%. That's something that the majority of council supported in order to ensure some predictability and reliability to our taxpayers, that they know what the rate is going to be when they receive their tax bill next year. Secondly, we're putting in a record number of supports for both affordable housing, building and planning and constructing affordable housing, in addition to funding dozens of new social agencies that help the vulnerable in our community, and providing that kind of support through social services that will help directly those individuals who are finding it very difficult, particularly in the midst of COVID-19 and the challenges that COVID-19 places on all our residents, with a particular harshness towards those vulnerable members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And my second question is for Dr. Etches. Dr. Etches, do you have any concerns of a spike in transmission as we start to socialize more indoors and as restrictions continue to ease?
I think that there will be more opportunities for COVID to be transmitted as more people come into close contact and are maybe in situations where they're not wearing masks indoors for certain activities, where they're eating or drinking. These opportunities for transmission ideally are halted by the protection that people have by immunization. It's not 100% perfect, and so it is possible for our overall rates to go up. And it's why we continue the immunization campaign. So we are still welcoming people with first and second doses that are required at our clinics, and we're looking forward to shrinking the unvaccinated population when it comes to 5 to 11-year-olds as well, hopefully in the coming weeks. So it is important to always continue to keep in mind there are things we can do to choose lower risk activities that are less likely to contribute to COVID transmission. So, avoiding crowds, choosing things outdoors as much as we can, making sure we're in environments where we can have more protection from vaccination, limiting the number of close contacts. These are still things we need to do until we can see that we are making it through this period of potentially more upwards pressure on the transmission rates. And then we have that counter pressure coming from vaccination of younger populations. So I'm appreciative. People are doing it. It's working right now. People are keeping COVID transmission manageable. So I just encourage people to keep choosing those lower risk actions.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Craig Lord at Global Ottawa.
Thank you. Mayor Watson, wondering if I can get your comment on the draft police budget. We're not seeing the 0% increase that some people had called for, but the 2.9 increase will not see any new hires that had been previously planned by the force. So do you think that the 2022 budget as it stands is a fair increase for the service and enough to provide that adequate level of policing?
Well, first and foremost, I'm pleased that the draft budget by the police does not anticipate cutting police officers or laying off police officers. That was a number one priority of mine, and certainly I believe a majority of members of council did not want to see the budget frozen, which would have meant about 140 police officers being laid off. And these were all the new police officers that were just recently hired because, as you know, if you're last in, you're first out under the seniority system. Excuse me. So that's a good start. I'm hoping that during the course of the process that we don't see attempts to do that, in fact, to slash the budget so that we would have to lay people off. As you know, the police have come almost to 3%, plus they also get the 1.7%, so they're close to 4.5% increase over the course of 2022. And as you know, Craig, if the police service presents a budget and they don't meet their targets at the end of the year, it's the City of Ottawa, through our taxpayers, have to pick up the tab. So there'll be a lot of scrutiny on the police budget to ensure that it's solid, it's not plugged with unrealistic numbers, to ensure that we don't end up balancing the books of the police department at the end of the year. So I give credit to Chief Slowly, who's put forward the budget, and also the fact that we were able to secure those $450,000 for a very important mental health initiative in the Byward Market, working with Wendy Muckle and Intercity Health and the Canadian Mental Health Association. And I think that is going to do a lot of good for those people who are in the Lower Town, Rideau, Byward Market area that do need some significant help as a result of mental health issues that they're facing, and we see on a regular basis as we go into the Byward Market. So that's, I think, an important initiative, and glad that it was in the city budget and funded in part by the close to $450,000 that the police have freed up. Thank you.
Thanks. And just to change gears a bit, I think this is probably for Steve Kanellakis, just looking for clarity on with the holdback that was brought up by the province in that letter. I understand it's from the stage one funding of $600 million. So I'm just wondering how much of that initial funding for stage one has been paid to the city already, and how much is still outstanding and being held back at this point?
Hi, sorry, Craig, I was just conferring with Wendy here. Yeah, we've received all our funding for stage one. The last piece is to submit the final kind of audited statements that are still in progress. We're still working on that. That's not unusual for a project of this size. And now they put three other requirements before they release the $60 million, which were in that letter, which, as I said earlier to another question from a journalist, that I have no doubts at all that we're going to be able to meet those requirements that they put in the letter. In fact, we're well underway and on our way to complete what they've asked for already. So, it's the last bit of funding we need to complete stage one and close it off. And there's no reason why that should be held back once we reply before the end of December, as per the request.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nous allons maintenant passer à Julien Paquette à Le Droit.
Julien Paquette from Le
Bonjour.
Droit.
Depuis pas plus tard que la semaine dernière,
just
le
last
premier
week,
ministre d'Ontario l'a répété,
Ontario
le projet de
Premier
train léger, c'est de
said
juridiction
that the light
municipale.
rail was
Depuis 2 ans,
city
c'est ce que les représentants de la
responsibility.
province
And for the
nous
past
répètent
2 years,
quand il est
that's what
question
the
du
province
train léger
officials have been telling
et de
us
ses
when we're
problèmes. Ils
talking
veulent pas
about the light
s'en
rail
mêler, laisse la
and the
ville,
problems we have.
s'occuper de ça.
They're just
Donc,
letting the city
est-ce
deal
que
with
vous aviez
that.
eu, dans le fond, ma question, est-ce que vous aviez eu un préavis
My question is,
de la part de
did
la
you have
province
advance notice from the
les
province
problèmes récents changeaient un peu
that
cette
the
situation-là
recent
et qui a
problems
mené finalement à
were going
l'envoi
to
de la
change
lettre
the
d'hier?
situation, and that led to the letter from yesterday?
Un instant, Julien.
C'est bon.
Non, on a reçu la lettre.
No, we received the letter last night at 8:30. So it was a surprise for us. But as I said a few minutes ago, we're okay with the questions. We'll provide a complete answer in the coming weeks. As Mr. Kanellakis just said, It's a tradition for our government to make sure that the funds are properly used by the municipality. We have lots of time to answer. They gave us a date, December 31st, 2022. So I think we'll provide the letter with answers to all the questions by the end of this year. And Mr. Ford, the Premier, said that he had confidence in the City of Ottawa and the project. And that's the reason why the province provided the funds for phase 2. Thank you.
Toujours concernant cette lettre-là,
Still regarding this letter,
est-ce que c'est votre compréhension que si
is this
vous
your understanding that
n'arrivez pas à satisfaire les exigences de la province, vous n'arrivez pas à répondre aux questions
the province's requirements, you're not answering all the questions?
Est-ce que c'est votre compréhension que le financement
de l'étape 2
that
the funding for phase 2
menacé?
Would be threatened? No, there's no problem with phase 2. The letter deals specifically with phase 1. The province put in $600 million, and there's a holdback of, and I have a full trust in the city staff here to answer all the questions. And one of the suggestions was it was necessary to have an independent consultant, and Mr. Kanellakis found an excellent firm who will present their conclusions to the public. We will have a technical briefing in the upcoming days.
Merci.
Thank you.
We'll now be going to John Willing at the Ottawa Citizen.
Hi, Kina. Thank you. It's a question for Ms. Stephenson, and it has to do with payments in lieu of taxation. And I've noticed over recent years, the number seems to be going down, and I see again projected for 2022, we're going to be down about $4 million. So I'm wondering if this is going to be posing a problem for the municipality at some point, and if this requires a discussion between City Hall and I guess the Treasury Board.
John, can you just repeat the beginning of that question, which item you're talking about?
The payments in lieu of taxes, the revenue that comes into the city, specifically, I think, when it comes to the federal government.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for that clarification. I appreciate it. It's been an interesting budget line over the last couple of years, and it really has to do with, I'm going to say, the historical assessment cycle and the values attributed to those. And as you know, as we go through the assessment cycles, they go up and down. There's a couple of pieces there with respect to those values. So they appeal their values on a very regular basis. In some instances they win, in some instances they don't. So that's a bit of fluctuation that we see from year to year. We try and smooth it out as we can. One of the other issues that we're dealing with really has to do with the business education taxes. And we spoke about this in our report when we tabled the budget today. And there's just, the province had included a different rate for the federal government when they put their business education tax forward last spring, I believe it was. And so the federal government has paid us on a higher rate. There's a lower rate that they had given to businesses really to help them get through the pandemic, as well as spur the economy and job creation. And the federal government is talking about paying the city at that lower rate. So it's a bit of a risk that we have, but there's some discussions that are going on both at the staff level and the political level to maintain those rates at the higher rates.
If I could just follow up on that from what Wendy said, John, just last week, I convened a meeting of, I guess, 7 or 8 different mayors that are facing similar challenges as a result of the PILT legislation and business education tax and so on. You think of, for instance, Trenton, the air base, and Kingston with the prisons. So we've written a joint letter to the 2 levels of government, because we're not the only municipality that is caught in this situation, and we want our federal and provincial colleagues to ensure that they pay their fair share in taxes through the PILT system. So we just sent that letter off, I believe, last week, and we look forward to a dialogue with both the province and the federal government over the course of the next several weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a question about the $11.5 million regarding the savings for Transpo for service reductions. And I'm wondering, I guess, Mayor, is there a chance that will be baked into the base budget for OC Transpo, or do you see this saving just temporary for 2022?
Well, I'll ask maybe Steve or Wendy or Renee to comment on it, but you know, the challenge we're facing, John, with OC Transpo is twofold. One, the physical and mechanical problems that we've been dealing with for the last couple of months, and then the low ridership, obviously, as a result of COVID-19. So certainly I see this as a one-time initiative that we can't build into the budget, because we need to see how the uplift in ridership takes place starting in 2022. We also need to continue to work with the other two orders of government. As I mentioned in my speech, we don't have formal confirmation of the federal and provincial government coming to help us for 2022. They've been very good partners in 2020 and 2021, but every single transit system in Canada, for that matter, is dealing with reduced ridership, which means reduced revenue. Wendy, did you want to offer other comments on the 11 million?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. And John, when we had actually done half of this reduction last year, so there was a reduction in service, and I believe it was $5.5 million or $6 million that we had reduced the budget by. So that's what you're seeing, and what was in the presentation this morning is that full year effect.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Nous allons maintenant passer à Nafi Alibert à Radio-Canada.
Nafi Alibert, Radio-Canada. I wanted to get back on the police budget. Could you explain, after all the pressures there were, why is it so difficult to freeze that budget? What would we lose?
Juste un instant, Nafi.
Just a minute. Well, it's difficult to freeze that budget because we had agreements with the police unions, and if the union is not satisfied with our offer, there's a process to be followed, arbitration process, and we have no power to control this process. It's independent. So 82% of the cost for the police service is for the remuneration, compensation of police officers and civilians. So that's half the budget, and we have to respect the collective agreements and the associations, the unions representing the police. For instance, if we were to freeze the budget at the 2021 level, some 140 police officers would have been to be cut. So I certainly do not support such a move. We need police officers everywhere in a big city like Ottawa, and most members of council are asking for more police presence in their area. Follow-up question for public health. Are you expecting to remove the recommendation for working from a distance, or if you are planning the return to work in Ottawa?
Where are you on the line?
Yeah, sorry. Dr. Etches, did you hear that question?
Dr. Etches, oh.
Je m'excuse, non. S'il vous plaît, répétez la question.
No, sorry, could you repeat? I wanted to know if, like in Quebec, you were planning to remove the recommendation for working from a distance, and if you were planning a return to work in Ottawa soon. Well, I don't have any details on the return to work from the federal government, but it's possible to work safely during the pandemic when people are immunized. Same with the other measures like wearing a mask inside, maintaining a distance, and vaccination. So it's important for all employers to do whatever has to be done to limit transmission. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your time. Ceci conclut notre point de presse pour aujourd'hui.
This concludes our press conference today. Thank you.